At the family reunion, my son Mason stood up, looked at everyone present, and declared, "Dad is leaving me all 11 rental houses in Houston." "Too bad. You're not going to get anything, Mom." My daughter-in-law, Tiffany, clapped her hands as if she were at a Broadway show. I just smiled and said, "Son, you really don't know, do you?" He froze. Tiffany shouted, "Know what?" And I remained silent because they had forgotten the most important part. Let me tell you how we got to this moment, because what happened that day was no accident. It was the result of years of being invisible in my own family. My name is Margaret. I am 64 years old, and for 40 years I built an empire alongside my husband, Arthur. Brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice. While others slept, we worked. While others spent, we saved. 11 properties in Houston, 11 houses generating steady income, 11 proofs that hard work and dedication pay off. But when Arthur died 3 years ago, something changed. Not in me, but in my son. Mason was always our pride and joy, our only son. We gave him everything: education at the best schools, opportunities we never had. We prepared him to be a good man, honest, hardworking, like his father. But I never imagined that the day Arthur closed his eyes forever, Mason would open his with eyes full of ambition. At first, it was subtle comments. "Mom, now that Dad is gone, maybe you should let me handle the properties." Or, "Don't worry about the numbers, I'll take care of everything." It sounded considerate, protective even. But I knew those numbers better than the lines on my own hand. I had kept the books for decades. I knew exactly how much was coming in and how much was going out. And then Tiffany came into his life. A 32-year-old woman. Long, perfect hair, nails always manicured, expensive dresses, a calculated smile. She married Mason 2 years after Arthur's death. And from day one, she looked at me as if I were an obstacle, a hindrance between her and what she considered hers. "Sweetie," she would say to me, with that sweet, poisonous voice, "it must be so hard for you to manage all those properties alone. Why don't you let Mason take the reins? After all, eventually, it will all be his." Eventually. That word was repeated over and over again, at every family gathering, at every Thanksgiving dinner, on every phone call, as if I were already dead, as if my life and my 40 years of work meant nothing. I remember one afternoon in particular. It had been 6 months since the wedding. We were at my house. Tiffany was wearing a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than the monthly rent of one of my properties. She sat on the sofa where Arthur and I used to plan our future, and she crossed her legs with practiced elegance. "Margaret," she said. She didn't even call me Mom anymore. "Mason and I have been talking. We think it's time for you to rest. You've worked so hard. You deserve to enjoy your old age." Old age. I was 62 at the time. I walked 3 miles a day. I managed my properties without anyone's help. I paid my bills. I made my decisions. But to her, I was already a useless old woman. "I appreciate your concern," I replied calmly, "but I am perfectly capable of handling what Arthur and I built." Tiffany smiled, that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you are. But wouldn't it be easier if Mason took care of it? After all, someday it will all be his. Why wait? Why wait?" As if my existence were just pending paperwork, Mason was sitting next to her. My son. The boy I nursed. The boy I held in my arms when he had a fever. The boy I taught to read, to ride a bike, to be a man of honor, and he said nothing. He didn't defend me. He just nodded when Tiffany spoke. That was the first time I felt the cold in my own living room, the cold of silent betrayal, the cold of realizing that to my own son, I was no longer his mother. I was an obstacle between him and 11 properties in Houston. But I said nothing that day. I just smiled. I poured coffee. I offered cookies. And when they left, I sat on the same sofa where Tiffany had crossed her legs. I closed my eyes. I thought of Arthur, of everything we had built, of everything we had sacrificed, and I made a decision. If they wanted to play, I would play. But by my rules. Comment if you have ever felt that your own family sees you as a burden and not as a person. The following months were strange. Tiffany and Mason began to visit me more often, but it wasn't out of affection. It was strategy. Every visit included comments about my health. about my age, about how tired I must be. "Mom, you look exhausted," Mason would say. "Sweetie, have you thought about moving to a smaller place? These stairs must be difficult for you." Stairs I climbed without a problem every day. One day they arrived with papers. Legal documents. Tiffany put them on the dining table with that smile. "It's just a precaution," she said. "Power of attorney. So Mason can help you make decisions if something happens to you." "If something happens to me, it's not necessary," I replied. "Mom, it's the sensible thing to do." Mason's voice sounded impatient, as if I were a stubborn child. I looked at both of them. Tiffany in her pearl-colored dress. Mason in his expensive suit that I had bought him for his birthday. "Let me think about it," I said. Tiffany pursed her lips. Mason sighed with frustration. "I didn't sign anything that day. Not that day, or any other. Because I knew something they didn't know. Something Arthur had taught me in 40 years of marriage. Never show all your cards. And never underestimate a woman who has built an empire from scratch. But let me take you further back in time. Because to understand why I did what I did, you need to know who I was before all this. I met Arthur when I was 24. I worked cleaning offices in downtown Houston, 3 jobs, 12-hour shifts, hands cracked from bleach and detergents. Arthur worked in construction. He would come home with boots full of concrete and arms tanned by the Sunday. We had nothing. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where the paint was peeling off the walls. We shared an old car that stalled at every traffic light. We ate rice and beans 6 days a week, but we had a dream. Someday, Arthur told me as we counted coins on the kitchen table, we're going to have property. We're going to be owners, not tenants. And we worked for that dream like animals. We saved every penny. We didn't eat out. We didn't go to the movies. We didn't buy new clothes. Every dollar we earned went straight into a savings account. It took us 7 years to scrape together the down payment for our first property. 7 years. A small house in a neighborhood nobody wanted, cracked walls, rusted pipes. But it was ours. We fixed it with our own hands. Arthur learned plumbing by watching videos. I learned to paint, to repair, to do everything. We rented it out. And with that money, we saved for the second one. It was like that for 40 years, one property after another. Sacrifice after sacrifice. While Mason grew up, we worked. When other parents took their kids to Disney World, we were fixing roofs. When others went on vacation, we were negotiating with banks. But we never regretted it, because we were building a future. Not just for us, for our family, for our son. Mason never saw the nights Arthur and I stayed up worrying about paying the mortgage. He never saw my hands bleeding after cleaning an entire property by myself because we couldn't afford help. He never saw his father work with a fever because we couldn't afford to lose a day's wages. He only saw the result. 11 houses, stable income, comfort. And he assumed it had all been easy, that it had fallen from the sky, that it was his natural right to inherit it all without effort. When Arthur got sick, everything changed. It was fast, too fast. One day he was fine. The next, the doctors gave us 6 months. Cancer, aggressive, relentless. During those 6 months, Arthur and I had many conversations. Difficult conversations. Conversations no couple wants to have. One night, 3 months before he died, we were at the hospital. It was late. The hallways were silent. Arthur took my hand. His fingers were cold, weak. "Margaret," he said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. I'm listening. Everything we built together. But legally, many properties are in my name. That has to change. Arthur, let's not talk about that now. We have to talk about it." His voice was firm despite the weakness. "When I'm gone, Mason is going to want to take control. I know him. He's my son, but I also know his character. And if things are left to his discretion, you're going to be left with nothing. Mason wouldn't do that." Arthur looked at me with those eyes that knew me better than anyone. "Are you sure?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I had also seen the changes in Mason. The way he talked about money, the way he asked about the properties, the impatience in his voice when I made decisions without consulting him. "The lawyer is coming tomorrow," Arthur said. "We're going to transfer everything to your name. Everything. The 11 properties, the accounts, everything. Because you are the one who deserves to decide what to do with what we built together. And Mason. Mason will receive what is fair when the time comes. But that time is decided by you, no one else. The next day, Diane came. Diane had been our lawyer for 15 years. A 50-year-old woman. Serious, professional. Short gray hair she wore with pride. A tan suit. Always a tan suit. She brought a folder full of documents. Arthur signed each one with a trembling hand. I signed after, and just like that, in a hospital room that smelled of disinfectant and sadness, 11 properties passed completely into my name. Margaret, Diane told me before leaving, keep these documents in a safe place. And if you ever need help, call me, no matter the time. Thanks, Diane. She looked at me with a strange intensity. Arthur told me his concerns about Mason. I've seen changes in him over these years, too. Be careful. He's your son. I know. But money changes people. And 11 properties in Houston are a lot of money. She left. Arthur fell asleep, and I sat there next to his bed, holding a folder that contained the future of everything we had built. 3 months later, Arthur died. The funeral was on a rainy Tuesday. The whole family came. Cousins, aunts, and uncles. Friends. The cemetery was full of black umbrellas and tears. Mason cried. Tiffany was by his side, wearing an elegant black dress and high heels that sank into the wet grass. She hugged me. She told me comforting words that sounded rehearsed. But I saw her. I saw how she looked at the people arriving, how she calculated, how she evaluated who had money and who didn't, how her hug lasted longer with those who dressed better. And I knew the battle was just beginning. After the funeral, there was a gathering at my house, relatives eating, sharing memories of Arthur. But Mason and Tiffany pulled me aside into the kitchen. Mom, Mason said, we need to talk about the properties. Now, it's important. We need to know how things stand legally. Tiffany nodded. It's for the best. So there are no surprises later. Surprises. Everything is in order, I said simply. Dad left a will. Yes. And what does it say? I looked at both of them. My son, my daughter-in-law. 2 people who had just buried a good man and were already asking about his inheritance. It says that I decide what to do with everything. Mason blinked. What does that mean? It means exactly what you heard. Your father left everything to my discretion. When I decide. And how I decide. Tiffany clenched her jaw. Mason turned red. But Mom, that makes no sense. Eventually, everything must pass to me. I am the only heir. Eventually, but not now. When then? When I decide. The silence in that kitchen was colder than any winter. The months following Arthur's death were the hardest of my life. Not only because of the pain of losing the man with whom I shared 40 years, but because of discovering that my son had become a stranger. Mason began calling me every day, not to ask how I was, not to know if I needed company, but to talk about the properties. Mom, the tenant in the house in the Woodlands says there's a leak. Did you call the plumber? Mom, the rent for the property in Katy hasn't been deposited. Did you check? Mom, you should raise the rent prices. You're charging too little. As if I didn't know how to manage what I had managed for decades. And Tiffany, she was worse. She came to visit me with desserts bought at expensive bakeries. She sat in my living room, looked at Arthur's photos on the walls, and talked. Margaret, I've been thinking. 11 properties are a lot for one person, especially at your age, at my age. You should consider selling some. It would be less stress for you. I don't want to sell, but think about it. You could have the money in the bank, live peacefully, no worries. I have no worries. She smiled. Always that smile. You could also transfer some to Mason's name. You know, to avoid taxes later. It's what smart people do. Smart people. As if 40 years of building an empire didn't qualify me as smart. I'll think about it, I told her, knowing I never would. But the visits continued. The calls continued. The pressure continued. Until one day, 6 months after the funeral, Mason showed up at my house, unannounced. He brought Tiffany. And they brought something else. Papers. Mom, we need to talk seriously. Mason's voice sounded different, harder, colder. I'm listening. Tiffany put the papers on the table. They were legal documents, many documents. We've consulted with a lawyer, she said, and it turns out there are more efficient ways to handle the properties, ways that would benefit you and us. What kind of ways? Creating a corporation, putting the properties in a trust, with Mason as administrator. You would still receive the income, of course, but the management would be more professional, as if I had been playing house for 40 years. I'm not interested. Mom, you're not understanding. Mason leaned forward. This isn't optional. It's the right thing to do. It's what Dad would have wanted. Your father left everything to me. He trusted my judgment. Dad was sick when he made those decisions. He wasn't thinking clearly. The air left my lungs. What did you say? What you heard? Dad wasn't in his right mind. Any judge would understand that. Tiffany put her hand over Mason's. A gesture that was supposed to be reassuring but was clearly calculated. Margaret, we don't want to fight. We just want the best for everyone. Sign these papers. Let's do this in a civilized way. I looked at both of them, my son and his wife, sitting at the table where Arthur and I had planned our future, where we had celebrated birthdays, where we had cried and laughed. Get out of my house. What? Get out. Now. Mason stood up. His face was red with fury. You know what? You're making a mistake. A big mistake. Sooner or later, everything will be mine anyway. The only thing you're doing is complicating things. Get out. Tiffany gathered the papers with jerky movements. She looked at me with contempt. She didn't even try to hide anymore. You are a stubborn old woman, she said. And stubborn old women end up alone in nursing homes. They left, slamming the door. I sat at that table, trembling, not from fear, from rage. Because in that moment I understood something fundamental. My son was no longer my son. He was a stranger moved by greed, and his wife was the devil whispering in his ear. That night I called Diane. I need to see you, I said. Urgent, what happened? Mason is trying to take everything from me. There was silence on the other end of the line. I'm coming over. Diane arrived an hour later. She entered with her leather briefcase and her serious expression. She sat across from me, took out a notebook. Tell me everything. I told her. The visits, the pressures, the papers, the veiled threats, everything. Diane listened, took notes. Her expression became graver with every word. When I finished, she closed her notebook. Margaret, what Mason is trying to do has a name. Elder financial abuse. It is illegal. And if he keeps pressuring you, we can take legal action. I don't want to sue my son. I understand. But you need to protect yourself. How? Diane leaned forward. Her eyes shone with an intensity I hadn't seen before. I want to propose something. Something Arthur and I had discussed before he died, but we didn't have time to implement. What? A plan. A plan to ensure that if Mason tries to take what is yours, he encounters a very unpleasant surprise. I don't understand. Listen to me carefully. The 11 properties are in your name. That's good. But Mason can try to sue you. He can claim that you are not mentally capable of managing them. He can create legal problems that cost you years and a lot of money to resolve. So what do you propose? Diane opened her briefcase, took out more documents. I propose we take total control of the situation. That we make moves Mason doesn't expect. That we protect your assets in a way no one can question. What kind of moves? She smiled. A small, but significant smile. First, we are going to create an ironclad will, so solid that no lawyer can break it. Second, we are going to document every interaction you have with Mason from now on. Every threat, every pressure, every attempt at manipulation. Third, she stopped, looked me straight in the eye. Third, we are going to do something Mason will never foresee. What? We are going to sell the properties. I was speechless. Sell. Not all, but most. Discreetly, one by one, over the next 2 years, and we are going to invest that money in a way that only you have access to. When Mason realizes, it will be too late, but those properties are my life. They are Arthur's legacy. No, Margaret. Diane's voice was firm but kind. Arthur's legacy is you, your well-being, your peace, your dignity. The properties are just brick and cement. The important thing is that you are protected. I leaned back in the chair. My mind was a whirlwind. What if Mason asks? He knows how many properties I have. Does he know or does he assume? I thought about that. Mason had never seen the documents. He had never been involved in the actual management. He only knew what Arthur and I had told him years ago. He assumes, I admitted. Exactly. And people who assume are easy to surprise. Diane put the documents in front of me. Think about it tonight. But think hard, because what comes next won't be easy. Mason is going to fight. He's going to threaten. He's going to try to emotionally manipulate you. Are you ready for that? I looked at the papers, looked at Diane, thought of Arthur, of 40 years of sacrifice, of my son telling me Arthur wasn't in his right mind, of Tiffany calling me a stubborn old woman. I'm ready, I said. And that night, in my empty house, I made the hardest decision of my life. I was going to protect what Arthur and I had built, even if that meant protecting it from my own son. The next 2 years were a masterpiece of silence and strategy. Diane and I met every 2 weeks, always at her office, never at my house. We never left a trace that Mason or Tiffany could follow. The first property I sold was the house in Katy, a small property, 2 bedrooms, good neighborhood. A young couple bought it for $320,000. When the money hit my account, I felt something strange. Not sadness. It was power. How do you feel? Diane asked me. Free, I replied. And it was true. For 40 years, those properties had been my pride, but also my chain. Each one required maintenance, attention, worry. And now, with Arthur gone and my son turned into an enemy, they had become more burden than blessing. I sold the second property 3 months later, then the third, then the fourth. Diane helped me invest every dollar. Mutual funds, bonds, accounts in different banks, all in my name. All protected with passwords only I knew, and Mason suspected nothing. Because I kept living the same. Same house, same car, same clothes. There were no visible changes in my lifestyle that could alert him. When he called asking about the properties, I answered vaguely. Everything's fine, son. And the tenants? Paying on time? Do you need help with anything? No, thanks. Everything is under control. And he stayed calm, because in his mind, the 11 properties were still there, waiting for him, his guaranteed inheritance. But there was a problem. Mason had started handling the collections for some properties, not because I had asked him to, but because he simply started doing it. He called the tenants directly, told them he was the owner's son and that now he would be in charge of receiving payments. And some tenants, not knowing better, paid him. At first, I didn't realize. But after 6 months, the numbers didn't add up. Money was missing. A lot of money. I mentioned it to Diane. How much is missing? She asked. I took out my calculations. I had kept a record of every payment that should have come in. Approximately $42,000 in the last 8 months. Diane got serious. Margaret, that is theft. He's my son. He is a thief. Her voice left no room for debate. And we need to document it. Every penny missing. Every tenant who paid him instead of you. Everything. I spent the next few weeks contacting tenants, asking casual questions, confirming my suspicions. And yes, Mason had been collecting rent from 3 properties. Money that never reached my accounts. Money that simply disappeared into his pockets. When Diane saw the full evidence, she shook her head. This is enough to criminally sue him. I'm not going to put my son in jail. But you're going to use this if he tries something, right? I looked at her without answering, because we both knew the answer. Meanwhile, Tiffany became more aggressive. One day she appeared at my house with a real estate magazine. She sat on my sofa as if it were hers. She wore a pale pink dress and shoes that probably cost $1,000. Margaret, look at this. She opened the magazine and pointed to an ad. Apartments for seniors. They have nurses, activities, meals included. Wouldn't it be perfect for you? I don't need nurses. Not yet, but eventually we all get to that age. Wouldn't it be better to plan ahead? I am happy in my house. This house is too big for you alone. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a huge yard. What do you need so much space for? It is my home. Tiffany closed the magazine. She looked at me with that expression I knew so well, fake concern hiding pure ambition. You know, if you sold this house, you could have a lot of extra money. You could live comfortably in a small apartment. And the rest of the money? She left the sentence floating in the air. The rest could go into an account for Mason. You know, to ensure his future. His future. As if my 38-year-old son, with a stable job and a wife who spent money like water, needed me to ensure his future. I'm not going to sell my house. You are so stubborn. She wasn't smiling anymore. You know, eventually you're going to have to leave all this. Why not make it easier for everyone? You can leave, Tiffany. Excuse me? You can leave. Get out of my house. Now. She stood up. Her face was red with contained rage. Mason was right. You are impossible. But it doesn't matter. Sooner or later, everything will be ours anyway. And when that happens, you're going to regret having treated us like this. She left, leaving the door open. That night, when Diane came to review more documents, I told her what had happened. They're increasing the pressure, she observed. That means they are desperate. They probably have debts. They probably counted on your money for something. How do you know? Experience. I've seen this hundreds of times. Children waiting for inheritances, spending in advance, getting into debt assuming parents' money will save them. Diane looked at me seriously. Do you know what Mason's financial situation is? No. You should find out. It took me 2 weeks, but I discovered it. Mason and Tiffany lived in a house that cost $900,000. Huge mortgage. 3 luxury cars in the garage. Vacations in Europe twice a year. Designer clothes. Expensive restaurants every weekend. And Mason's income didn't cover even half of that lifestyle. They were in debt up to their necks. And they were counting on my death to save them. That realization was like a punch to the gut. My own son was waiting for me to die. Not because he loved me and it hurt to lose me, but because he needed my money. I showed the information to Diane. Worse than I thought, she said. They owe more than $200,000 on credit cards. The mortgage is 3 months behind. They are about to lose the house. How did you get that information? I have my sources. Diane closed the folder. Margaret, this changes everything. Mason doesn't just want your inheritance. He needs it desperately. And desperate people do terrible things. What kind of terrible things? They can try to declare you mentally incompetent. They can forge documents. They can manipulate other relatives against you. They can do anything. I felt cold. What should I do? Accelerate the plan. So far, you've sold 7 properties. 4 remain. We need to sell 3 more. Leave just 1. And we need to do it fast. Why just 1? Because when the time for confrontation comes, Mason needs to believe there is still something to gain. If he knows you sold everything, he can get violent. But if he thinks 1 property remains, he will keep playing the game. And when will that confrontation be? Diane smiled. That smile I had learned to recognize. The smile of someone who has a perfect plan. Soon, very soon. But first, we need to set the stage. We need Mason to feel confident. We need him to believe he has already won. How? We are going to organize a family meeting. You are going to announce that you want to discuss the inheritance, that you are ready to make decisions. Mason is going to think you finally gave in to his pressure. And then you will give him the surprise of his life. In the following weeks, I sold 3 more properties. Every sale gave me more power, more security, more certainty that I was doing the right thing. The accumulated money exceeded $8 million, all invested, all protected, all out of Mason's reach. And only 1 property remained, a small house in Pasadena. The first one Arthur and I had bought together, the one we had fixed with our own hands. That one I wouldn't sell. That one had a different purpose in my plan. Diane finished preparing all the final documents. Ironclad will, evidence of Mason's theft, record of all pressures and attempts at manipulation, complete documentation of all sales. Are you ready? She asked me. How do you feel? I thought of Arthur, of 40 years together, of everything we had built, of the son we had raised with so much love, and who now only saw dollar signs where he should see his mother. I feel at peace, I replied. And it was true, because I knew what was coming wasn't revenge, it was justice. I called Mason on a Tuesday afternoon. Son, I need you to come this Saturday, you and Tiffany. I'm going to hold a family meeting. There was silence on the other end. I could feel his surprise. A meeting? What for? To talk about the future, about the properties, about the inheritance. I think it's time to make decisions. Another silence. Longer. I could imagine him smiling, believing he had finally won. Of course, Mom. We'll be there. What time? 2 in the afternoon. And bring whoever you want. Family, friends. I want everyone to hear what I have to say. Are you sure? It's a private matter. No. I want witnesses, Mason. I want no doubts later. As you say, we'll be there. He hung up. And I stayed holding the phone, breathing deep, preparing for what would come. Diane arrived Friday night. She brought 2 briefcases full of documents. We reviewed them one by one. Every paper, every piece of evidence, every detail of the plan. Nervous? She asked me. Terrified. It's normal. But remember, you have control. You have the truth. And the truth always wins. And if Mason reacts badly, that's why I'll be there. And that's why you invited other relatives. Mason can scream, he can threaten, but he can't do anything in front of witnesses. Saturday dawned with a clear sky. I made coffee, arranged the living room, put the chairs in a circle, as if it were a normal meeting, just any family conversation, but we both knew it wasn't. At 2 o'clock sharp, the guests began to arrive. First arrived my cousin Nancy, a 60-year-old woman. Sweet, honest. She had always been my confidant. Margaret, what is all this? She asked as she entered. You'll see, cousin, just wait. Then my neighbor Linda arrived. I had known her for 20 years. A woman who had seen everything, knew my history with Arthur, knew how hard we had worked. Family meeting? She asked curiously. Something like that. And then they arrived. Mason entered first. Gray suit, expensive tie, winner's smile. Behind came Tiffany. Ivory dress, sky-high heels, designer bag. She walked as if she already owned the house. Mom. Mason kissed my cheek. His hug was mechanical, cold. Tiffany didn't even greet me. She just sat in the best armchair and crossed her legs. Diane was the last to enter. With her tan suit, her leather briefcase, her professional and impenetrable expression. Mason saw her and frowned. The lawyer? Why is she here? Because this is a legal matter, I replied calmly. Sit down, everyone, please. I stood in front of them, 5 people watching me. Waiting, my heart was beating so fast I thought everyone could hear it. I called you because it's time to speak clearly. No secrets, no lies. About the properties Arthur and I built over 40 years. Mason leaned forward. His eyes shone with anticipation. I know there has been tension between us, I continued. I know Mason has been. Anxious to know what will happen with the inheritance. Not anxious, Mom. Worried. For you. His voice sounded rehearsed. Sure. Worried. I couldn't help a sarcastic tone. Worried enough that you've been collecting rents from my properties without my permission. The silence was absolute. What? Nancy's voice sounded surprised. Mason turned pale. Tiffany looked at him with huge eyes. I don't know what you're talking about, he stuttered. No? Let me refresh your memory, I signaled Diane. She took documents out of her briefcase. 3 properties, 8 months, $42,000 that you collected directly from the tenants, money that never reached my accounts. I was helping you. I was going to deposit it for you. In 8 months you didn't have time to make a deposit? Mom, this is a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. It's theft. My voice sounded louder than I expected. But don't worry. I'm not going to sue you. You're my son. Despite everything, you're still my son. Mason breathed a sigh of relief. However, I continued, I need to clarify some things about those 11 properties you're so interested in. What is there to clarify? There are 11 houses. Eventually they will be mine. You know it. Tiffany nodded. It's only fair. Mason is your only son. You're right about one thing. Mason is my only son. I paused. Long. Deliberate. But you're wrong about another thing. About what? About the number of properties. Mason blinked. What do you mean? I mean, there aren't 11 properties. The color left his face completely. What? There aren't 11 properties waiting for you, Mason. In fact, there's barely one left. Tiffany jumped up from her chair. What did you do? What I had the right to do. I sold my properties. 10 of them. Over the last 2 years. One by one. While you pressured me. While you called me old. While you planned to put me in a nursing home to keep everything. That's... Tiffany couldn't finish the sentence. Mason stood up too. His face was red. Veins in his neck stood out. You can't do that. Those properties are my inheritance. They were my properties, I corrected. And I could do with them whatever I wanted. As Arthur wanted me to do, Dad would never have wanted this. Oh, no? I looked at Diane. She took out another document. Diane, can you read what Arthur wrote 3 months before he died? Diane put on her glasses. Read with a clear and loud voice. Margaret, my love, my life partner. If you are reading this, it is because I am gone. I want you to know that every decision you make with our properties, I respect. If you need to sell them to protect yourself, sell them. If you need to use them to have peace, use them. The only thing that matters to me is that you are okay, that no one manipulates you, that no one takes away what we built together. Not even Mason. Especially if Mason becomes the person I fear he will become when money is involved. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad didn't write that, Mason whispered. It's signed, notarized, dated. Diane put the document on the table. And there's more. Arthur also left specific instructions on what to do if you tried to take control from your mother. This is a conspiracy, Tiffany pointed her finger at Diane. You two manipulated a dying man. Careful with what you say, Diane warned with an icy voice. I have 5 other witnesses who were present when Arthur signed these documents, including 2 notaries and a doctor who certified that he was in full possession of his mental faculties. Nancy looked at me with tear-filled eyes. Linda shook her head but smiled. They were on my side. I could feel it. And the money? Tiffany asked. Her voice sounded desperate. Where is the money from the sales? Safe, in investments, in bank accounts, in places where neither you nor Mason can touch it. We have debts. We need that money. Tiffany covered her mouth. She realized what she had just said. Ah, there's the truth. My voice sounded calm, almost kind. You don't care about my well-being. You care about your debts, your expensive house, your luxury cars, your vacations in Europe. Mom, we can talk about this. Mason tried to get closer. Please, I made mistakes. I admit it. But I'm your son, your only son. Are you really going to leave me with nothing? I'm not going to leave you with nothing. My answer surprised him. I'm going to leave you exactly what you deserve. What does that mean? It means the only property left, the house in Pasadena, is not for you. For whom then? For your children, my grandchildren, Liam and Sophia. I saw Tiffany stifle a scream. They will receive that property when they turn 25. Until then, it will be in a trust that neither you nor Tiffany can touch. Those are our children. They are my grandchildren. And I won't allow you to squander their inheritance paying for your ridiculous debts. Mason dropped into the armchair. He held his head in his hands. Tiffany paced back and forth like a caged animal. There's more, I added. And this time my voice sounded hard, cold. If you try to fight this legally, Diane has full documentation of the $42,000 you stole, Mason, and she is ready to file criminal charges. That would destroy me. You should have thought of that before stealing from your mother. Tiffany turned to me. Her face was a mask of pure hate. You are a bitter and cruel old woman. I hope you die alone. I'm already alone, Tiffany. My husband died, and my son died the day he decided I was worth less than a handful of properties. Mason looked up. His eyes were red. For a moment I thought he was going to cry. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of helpless rage. You can't do this to us, he whispered. We are your family. Family. The word came out of my mouth like poison. You talk to me about family? The same son who called the tenants behind my back? The same one who said his father wasn't in his right mind when he left everything to me? The same one who called me a stubborn old woman? I never. Don't lie. My voice sounded like thunder. Diane, please play the recording. Mason went pale as paper. What recording? Diane took a small device out of her briefcase, pressed a button, and Tiffany's voice filled the room. You are a stubborn old woman, and stubborn old women end up alone in nursing homes. Then Mason's voice. Mom, you're not understanding. This isn't optional. It's the right thing to do. It's what Dad would have wanted. And Tiffany again. Sooner or later, everything will be ours anyway. And when that happens, you're going to regret having treated us like this. Diane turned off the device. Nancy had her hand over her mouth. Linda shook her head with evident disgust. You recorded our conversations. Tiffany sounded hysterical. That is illegal. Not in the state of Texas, Diane replied with professional calm. Texas is a one-party consent state. Margaret had every right to record conversations in her own home, where she was a participant. This is a trap. Manipulation. No, Tiffany, this is evidence. Evidence that you tried to coerce a 64-year-old woman into handing over her assets. Evidence that any judge would take very seriously. Mason stood up, walked toward me. For a second I thought he was going to do something violent, but he stopped 2 feet away. Why, Mom? Why are you doing this to us? Why? My voice broke for the first time. Why did you force me? Why did you give me no alternative? Why did you stop seeing me as your mother and start seeing me as a bank account? I love you. No, Mason. You don't love me. You love what you think I have. You love what you think you can get from me. But me, the person, you stopped loving a long time ago. That's not true. Oh no. When was the last time you asked me how I felt? When was the last time you came to visit me alone without talking about money or properties? When was the last time you looked at me as your mother and not as your future inheritance? Mason opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because he had no answer. Because he knew I was right. Do you know what the saddest thing is? I continued. That your father and I worked 40 years to give you a better life. So you wouldn't suffer what we suffered. So you would have opportunities, education, a future. And instead of honoring that sacrifice by working hard like us, you decided to simply wait for me to die to take what you never earned. Mom, no, you don't have the right to call me that anymore. The words came out cold, definitive. A mother is someone you respect, someone you care for, someone you protect. I am none of that to you. I am just an obstacle between you and money. Tiffany took a step forward. Her face was a mask of fury. And what are we supposed to do now? How are we going to pay our debts? How are we going to keep our house? That is not my problem. My answer was simple. Direct. We are your family. No. You are 2 adults who lived beyond your means, expecting my death to save you. That isn't family. That is parasitism. We have children. Your grandchildren. Exactly. And that is why the remaining property is for them, not for you. Because I don't trust you to do the right thing. But I trust that when Liam and Sophia are 25, they will be mature enough to handle their inheritance. Mason turned to Diane. There has to be something we can do. Some way to fight this. Diane looked at him without a shred of sympathy. You can try. You can hire lawyers. You can spend what little you have left on legal fees. But I guarantee you will lose. Everything is in order. Everything is documented. Everything is ironclad. And furthermore, she paused deliberately. Furthermore, we have evidence you stole $42,000. If you try anything, we will file charges. And then you won't just lose the case. You will go to prison. Tiffany let out a sob. Not of sadness, of pure rage. This isn't going to stay like this. We will find a way. We will. You won't do anything. Nancy spoke for the first time. Her voice was firm. I've heard enough. I saw Margaret and Arthur work for decades. I saw their sacrifices. And now I see who you really are. You should be ashamed. Linda nodded. I am also a witness to everything said here, and if you try to do anything against Margaret, I will testify. Gladly. Mason looked around. Looking for allies, looking for support. He found nothing, only faces judging him, only people who had seen his true nature. Leave, I said finally. Get out of my house. Mom, please. I am not your mom. Not anymore. A mother is earned with respect and love. You haven't given me any of that in years, so leave. And don't come back. Tiffany was already at the door. Mason followed her slowly, like a man in shock, like someone who just lost everything and still can't process it. Before leaving, he turned one last time. You will never forgive me. I looked at him. I saw the child he was, the son I loved, the man he had become. There is nothing to forgive, Mason. Because to forgive, first I need you to recognize what you did, to feel genuine remorse, to understand the pain you caused, and I don't see any of that in your eyes. I just see someone furious because his plan failed. Go. He left. The door closed behind them, and the silence that followed was the deepest I had felt in years. Nancy approached and hugged me. I cried on her shoulder, not from sadness, from liberation. You did the right thing, she whispered. Arthur would be proud. Linda hugged me too. You are the strongest woman I know. Diane put all the documents in her briefcase. She looked at me with a small smile. How do you feel? Free, I replied. And for the first time in 3 years, it was true. That night, alone in my living room, I looked at Arthur's photos on the walls. Our youth photos, our photos working on the properties, our photos smiling after every successful sale. I did it, love, I told his photograph. I protected what we built. I protected your legacy, and I protected myself. The wind moved the curtains. For a moment, I could almost feel his presence, his approval. I slept better that night than I had in years. Because finally, there was peace. Peace that comes from doing the right thing, from setting boundaries, from refusing to be a victim. Peace that comes from understanding that sometimes protecting yourself means saying goodbye to the people you love most, even if those people are your own blood. The following days were strange. My phone rang constantly. Mason called. Left messages. At first furious, then pleading, then furious again. I didn't answer any. Tiffany wrote me emails. Long, accusatory, full of veiled threats. I deleted them without reading. Because I had already said everything I had to say, and they had heard everything they needed to hear. A week later, Diane called me. Margaret, I need to inform you of something. What happened? Mason hired a lawyer. They are going to try to contest the will. I waited to feel fear, concern, anxiety. But I felt none of that. Do they have a case? None. Absolutely none. But the process can take months, maybe a year. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared. And I was, because the truth was my armor. And justice was on my side. The legal process began 3 weeks after the meeting. Mason and Tiffany hired an expensive lawyer, one of those who promise impossibilities for astronomical fees. A 50-year-old man with a black suit and a shark smile. Diane received the documents at her office. She read them with an impassive expression. Then she looked at me and smiled. This is pathetic. What do they say? They allege that Arthur was not mentally competent when he transferred the properties to your name. They allege that you manipulated him, that you pressured him on his deathbed, that you exercised undue influence over a dying man. Every word was like a slap. How can they say that? Because they are desperate, and desperate people lie. Diane put the papers on her desk. But we have something they don't. What? The truth. And exhaustive documentation. We have Arthur's medical records proving he was mentally lucid. We have statements from 3 doctors. We have testimonies from 2 notaries. We have the dates, proving the transfers began months before his health worsened, so they are going to lose. They are going to lose so badly the judge will probably reprimand them for wasting the court's time. She was right. But the process was exhausting anyway. Depositions, interrogations, documents, more documents, court dates moving, lawyers talking in complicated legal terms, hours sitting in offices answering the same questions over and over. When did you know your husband would transfer the properties to you? 3 months before his death. Did you ask him to do it? No. It was his idea. Why do you think he did it? Because he loved me. Because he trusted me. Because he wanted to protect me. Protect you from what? I looked directly at Mason's lawyer. From what is happening right now. From this. From someone trying to take what I built with my own work. The lawyer clenched his jaw. Throughout the process, Mason didn't look at me once. He sat on the other side of the room with Tiffany. She held his hand, whispered in his ear, manipulated him even there. Once, during a recess, Nancy, who had come to support me, approached Mason. "Aren't you ashamed," she asked, "taking your own mother to court, trying to steal what is hers?" "She stole from us first," he replied bitterly. "Stole from you, by selling her own properties? The ones she and your father bought without your help." Mason had no answer. Nancy shook her head and returned to my side. "He's lost," she whispered to me, "completely lost." And she was right. The trial took 6 months. 6 months of stress, of sleepless nights, of wondering if I had done the right thing. But every time I doubted, I remembered Tiffany's words. I remembered the recordings. I remembered the $42,000 stolen. I remembered the lack of respect, the manipulation, the attempts to control me. And then I knew, yes, that I had done exactly the right thing. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was full. Mason and Tiffany on one side, me on the other with Diane, Nancy, and Linda. The judge was a 65-year-old man, gray hair, serious expression, glasses sliding down his nose. He had reviewed all the documents, all the evidence, all the testimony. "I have reviewed this case thoroughly," he began. His voice filled the room, and I must say it is one of the clearest cases I have seen in years. Mason leaned forward, hopeful. The plaintiffs allege that Mr. Arthur, the defendant's husband, was not mentally competent when he transferred his properties. However, the evidence proves otherwise irrefutably. Mason's face began to change. We have medical exams performed the same day of the transfer certifying full mental lucidity. We have testimonies from medical professionals. We have declarations from notaries who interacted directly with Mr. Arthur and confirmed that he understood perfectly what he was doing. The judge took off his glasses, looked directly at Mason. Furthermore, I find it particularly troubling that the plaintiff, Miss Plaintiff, Margaret's son, has admitted under oath that he collected rents from his mother's properties without authorization. That, sir, is theft. And the fact that you have not faced criminal charges is solely because your mother has shown a mercy that frankly you do not deserve. Tiffany stifled a scream. This case has no legal merit. It is a transparent attempt by a son to strip his mother of what legitimately belongs to her. It is, allow me to be frank, disgusting. Mason's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised his hand. "I haven't finished. The lawsuit is dismissed completely. Furthermore, I order the plaintiffs to pay all legal costs of the defense. Miss Margaret acted within her rights at all times. The properties were hers to do with whatever she wanted, and her decision to protect her assets from greedy relatives was not only legal but prudent." He banged the gavel. Case closed. The silence was absolute for 3 seconds. Then Nancy hugged me. Linda cried with joy. Diane simply nodded with professional satisfaction. On the other side of the room, Tiffany had her head in her hands. Mason stared into the void, defeated, destroyed, finally facing the reality that he had lost everything, not because of me, because of his own decisions. We walked out of the court into the bright Houston Sunday. The air had never smelled so sweet. The sky had never been so blue. "How do you feel?" Diane asked. "Victorious," I replied, "but also sad. It's normal. You just won against your own son." "I didn't win against him. I won against what he became." Diane put her hand on my shoulder. "Margaret, today justice worked. Today the system did the right thing. And today you demonstrated to your son that mothers are not easy prey, that older women are not helpless victims, that 40 years of work and sacrifice are not easily stolen." She was right, but it still hurt, because no matter how right you are, no matter how much justice is on your side, fighting against your own son leaves scars that never fully heal. That night, alone in my house, I cried. I cried for the child Mason was, for the man he could have been. for the relationship we lost, for the grandchildren I would probably never see again. I cried for Arthur, for not having him by my side to share this bitter victory. I cried for myself, for having to be so strong, for having to fight when all I wanted was peace. But when I finished crying, I dried my tears. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 64-year-old woman, gray in her hair, wrinkles on her face, but also strength in her eyes, dignity in her posture, power in her gaze. I saw a survivor. I saw a warrior. I saw someone who didn't let herself be defeated, and I smiled because I had won, not just in court. I had won my freedom, my peace, my right to live without being controlled, without being manipulated, without being seen as a source of money. I had won the right to decide my own destiny. 2 weeks later, Diane called me. "Margaret, Mason wants to talk to you." "No. He says he wants to apologize." "I'm not interested. He says he understands what he did wrong." "Diane, do you believe him?" There was a silence. "No," she admitted. "I think he is desperate because his house is in foreclosure. I think he thinks if he apologizes, you will help him financially." "Then your answer is no." "Definitely no." "Are you sure?" "He is your son. He was my son. Now he is just a man who tried to rob me, and I don't negotiate with thieves." Diane didn't insist, because she knew me, and she knew that when I made a decision, it was final. The months passed. Life went on. Slowly I began to heal. Nancy visited me often. We went out to lunch, went to the movies, did the things I never had time to do when I was managing 11 properties. Linda and I became closer. We shared coffee every morning, talked about life, about our fears, about our triumphs, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Real peace. Not the fake peace of pretending everything is okay, but the true peace of knowing you did the right thing even if it hurt. 1 year after the trial, something unexpected happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my garden pruning the roses Arthur had planted years ago. The sun was high. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh flowers. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nancy wasn't coming until Thursday. Linda was traveling visiting her sister. I went to the door, looked through the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was Sophia, my granddaughter, 14 years old, long dark hair like her father's when he was a boy, big, frightened eyes. I opened the door immediately. "Sophia, Grandma." Her voice broke. She had tears in her eyes. "Can I come in? Please." "Of course, my love. Of course." She entered quickly, looked back as if someone might be following her. "Are you alone?" "Yes. What happened? Are you okay?" She dropped onto the sofa and then began to cry. Not a soft cry, a deep cry, desperate, of someone who has been holding everything in for too long. I sat next to her, hugged her. She smelled of apple shampoo and youth, the innocence her father had lost long ago. "Tell me," I whispered. "Tell me everything." And she spoke. She told me about the last year, about how their house had been foreclosed on, about how they had to move to a small apartment in a rough neighborhood, about how her father came home every night more bitter, more furious, more defeated. "He blames everyone," Sophia said between sobs. "The bank, the economy, his bosses, but above all you, Grandma. He blames you for everything." "I know, my love, but I heard the recordings. Mom played them in court, and I was there. I heard what they said to you, what they did to you." She looked at me with eyes full of pain. "Why are they like that? Why did Dad become so bad?" I had no answer. Not one a 14-year-old could understand. "Sometimes people change," I said finally. "Sometimes money shows them who they really are. And sometimes what they show isn't pretty. Mom is worse. She screams all the time. She says you stole our future, that we should hate you, that you are a selfish old woman who left us on the street." Every word hurt, but didn't surprise me. "And you? Do you hate me?" Sophia hugged me tighter. "No, never. Because I remember how you were before. I remember when I came to visit you and you told me stories about Grandpa, about how you worked together, about how you built everything from scratch. I remember you always told me money doesn't make people. That hard work and honesty do. I cried. I couldn't help it. I miss Grandpa, she whispered. He would never have let this happen. Your grandfather loved you very much, you and Liam. You were his joy. Is it true you left a property for us? For Liam and for me. Yes, the house in Pasadena. The first one your grandfather and I bought. It will be yours when you turn 25. Why until 25? Because by then you will be real adults, mature, capable of making your own decisions, and because by then your parents won't be able to pressure you to give them the money. Sophia nodded slowly. You're smart, Grandma. I know it sounds terrible to say this about my own parents, but they are greedy. And if they could touch that money now, there would be nothing left for us. The wisdom in her words broke my heart. 14 years old, and she already understood what many adults never understand. Does your dad know you're here? No. He said if I ever saw you or spoke to you, he would kick me out of the house. But I needed to see you. I needed you to know I don't blame you, that I understand why you did what you did. And Liam? How is he? Confused. He's 11. He doesn't understand why we don't come to visit you anymore. Why Dad gets furious if someone mentions your name. But he also doesn't understand why we lost the house, why Mom cries every night, why everything is so hard now. Are you guys okay? Do you have food? Clothes? We have the basics. But it's not like before. Before Mom bought expensive clothes every week. Now we shop at thrift stores. Before we ate at restaurants. Now we eat pasta and rice almost every day. And your father works. Yes, but he lost his good job 6 months ago. Now he works in something that pays much less. And Mom had to get a job at a store. She hates it. She says it's humiliating. Humiliating. Tiffany, who always wore expensive dresses and designer shoes, now working in a store. The irony was almost poetic. Sophia, listen to me carefully. I took her face in my hands. Nothing that happened is your fault, or Liam's. You are innocent in all this. And I want you to know something important. What? When you turn 25, you will have that property. But you will also have something else. You will have letters I wrote for you. Letters where I explain everything. The story of your grandfather and me. Why I made the decisions I made. And I also left instructions on how to handle the money. How to invest. How to protect yourselves. How not to make the mistakes your father made. Really, really. And I also left money for your college education, in a fund your parents can't touch. When you are ready for college, there will be money waiting for you. Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were of relief. Hope. Thanks, Grandma. Thanks for not forgetting us. I could never forget you. You are the best thing your father did in his life. Even if he doesn't see it now. Sophia stayed for another hour. We talked. Laughed. She cried a little more. I gave her food. I prepared a package for her to take. Cookies, fruit. A little cash I slipped into her pocket when she wasn't looking. When she left, she hugged me tight. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, my sweetie. And remember, no matter what your parents say, no matter how much they hate me, I will always be here for you and for Liam. Always. Can I come again? Whenever you want. But be careful. I don't want you to have trouble with your father. It'll be worth the trouble. She left, and I stayed at the door watching her walk down the street until she disappeared. That night I called Diane. Sophia came to see me. What? How? I told her everything. Margaret, this could be complicated. If Mason finds out, let him find out. I'm not going to push my grandkids away because their father is an idiot. Diane sighed. Okay, but we need to do something else. We need to ensure that if something happens to you, Sophia and Liam are truly protected. What do you propose? I'm going to create a second trust. One for emergencies. If any of your grandkids need something before 25, education, health, real emergencies, there will be funds available. But only through me. Mason won't be able to touch them. Do it. And so it was done. Over the next few months, Sophia came to visit me every 2 weeks, always in secret, always ensuring her parents didn't know. She told me about school, about her dreams. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to help people. She wanted to be different from her parents. "I want to be like you and Grandpa," she told me once. "I want to work hard. I want to earn things myself. I don't want to wait for inheritances. I don't want money to change me like it changed Dad." And in that moment, I knew it had all been worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every day in court, every moment of pain. Because I had saved my grandkids. I hadn't just left them money. I had left them a lesson about dignity, about hard work, about not letting greed destroy you. And that lesson was worth more than any property. One afternoon, 3 months after Sophia's first visit, Liam also appeared at my door, shy, more confused, but with the same eyes, Arthur's eyes. "Sophia told me I could come," he said quietly. "Of course you can, always." I hugged him. He was taller than I remembered, 11 turning 12, growing up without me. "Why does Dad hate you?" he asked directly. "Kids always ask the hardest questions. Your dad doesn't hate me. He hates the decisions I made. He hates that I didn't give him what he wanted when he wanted it. But someday, when you're older, you'll understand that sometimes saying no is the greatest show of love." "I don't understand. I know. But you will. I promise." Liam stayed less time than Sophia, but before leaving, he asked me something that surprised me. "Grandma, can I see pictures of Grandpa?" I showed him entire albums. Photos of Arthur young, Arthur working, Arthur smiling, Arthur holding Mason as a baby. "He looks happy," Liam observed. He was, despite working so hard, despite having so little at the start. He was happy because he had love, family, purpose. "Do you think Dad was happy before?" "Yes, I think so." "And now?" I looked at my grandson, 11 years old with the wisdom of someone much older. "Now your dad is lost. But maybe someday he'll find himself again." I wanted to believe it. But deep down, I wasn't sure. 2 years after the trial, I received a call I didn't expect. It was late at night. I was reading in my living room when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up the receiver. "Mom." The voice was weak, broken, almost unrecognizable. But it was my son's voice, Mason. There was a long silence. I could hear his breathing, irregular, as if he were crying or trying not to. I need to talk to you. Diane told me you wanted to apologize 2 years ago. I wasn't interested then. Why should I be interested now? Because Tiffany left me. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel victory. I just felt emptiness. I'm sorry. Don't be. You were right about her. About everything." His voice broke completely. "She left as soon as the money ran out. She met another guy. One with money. She took the kids. Now I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment and see my kids every 2 weekends. Mason, no, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I spent 2 years blaming you. 2 years hating you. 2 years telling myself you had ruined my life. That if you had given me the properties, everything would have been fine. But it wouldn't have been fine. I know. Now I know," he cried openly. "I would have sold them. I would have spent all the money. On the house, on the cars, on keeping Tiffany happy. And in 5 years there would have been nothing left. Nothing except debt." I said nothing, just listened. "Last week, Sophia confronted me. She told me she had been visiting you, that you had explained everything, that she understood why you did what you did. And she asked me something that destroyed me." "What did she ask you?" "She asked me if I had ever really loved you, or if I just loved your money." His voice was barely a whisper, and I couldn't answer her. "Mom." I couldn't answer her because I didn't know the answer. Tears ran down my face. I hated myself in that moment. I saw myself through my daughter's eyes. And I saw a monster. I saw someone who betrayed his own mother for greed. Who stole from you, who called you old, who took you to court, who tried to take everything you and Dad built. Mason, I'm not calling to ask you for money. I'm not calling to ask you for anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. I understand that I caused all this. That you only protected yourself. That any mother in your place would have done the same. And that I owe you an apology I will probably never be able to repay. The silence stretched between us. Years of pain, of betrayal, of broken love, all contained in that silence. "Can I see you?" he asked finally. "Just once. Just to say it to you in person. So you see my eyes and know that this time it's real." I closed my eyes. Thought of Arthur, of what he would have wanted. "Come tomorrow, at 2. Really, really." He hung up. And I stayed holding the phone, trembling. I called Diane immediately. "Mason wants to see me." "What did you tell him?" "To come tomorrow." "Margaret, are you sure?" "It could be another manipulation. Could be, but I have to try. He's my son, Diane. And no matter what he's done, part of me will always love him. Then I'll be there with you. As backup. No, I need to do this alone." The next day, at 2 o'clock, Mason knocked on the door. When I opened it, I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight, a lot of weight. His face was gaunt, deep circles under his eyes, clothes simple and worn. His shoes had scuff marks. His hair, previously always perfectly styled, was messy and had gray streaks I didn't remember. He looked like his father, like Arthur in his last days. And my heart broke a little more. "Hi, Mom. Hi, son." We stood at the door for a moment. Two strangers who were once everything to each other. "Come in." He entered slowly, looking at the house as if seeing it for the first time, or maybe as if remembering it from another life. We sat in the living room, in the same spots where everything had started years ago. "You look different," I said. "I feel different. Losing everything changes you. It shows you who you really are, when you have nothing to hide behind." "And who are you?" "Someone who made terrible mistakes. Someone who hurt the person who loved him most. Someone who has to live with that every day." He took an envelope out of his pocket, put it on the table. "What is that?" $42,000. "Well, not exactly. It's a payment plan. I'm going to pay you back every cent I stole. It's going to take years. But I'm going to do it." I looked at the envelope without touching it. "How?" "I work 2 jobs now. One in construction, like Dad. Another in a warehouse at night. It's not much, but it's honest money. And every month I will deposit what I can until the debt is paid. Mason, I don't need that money, but I need to pay it. For my soul, for my conscience. To have some dignity when I look in the mirror." I looked at him really for the first time in years, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw real remorse, genuine pain, true shame. "Your father would be proud you are working in construction. Now I understand why he did it. There is dignity in hard work, in earning money with your hands, in sleeping exhausted, but knowing you earned it." He wiped his eyes. "I wish I had understood that sooner. Sometimes we need to lose everything to learn what really matters. Do you forgive me?" His voice was small, vulnerable, like when he was a child and had done something bad. I thought of everything, of the pain, of the betrayal, of the cruel words, of the trial, of the lost years. But I also thought of the nights I rocked him when he had a fever, of the times we celebrated his achievements, of the pride in Arthur's eyes when Mason graduated, of the boy he was before greed corrupted him. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened," I said slowly. "It doesn't rebuild trust in a day. It doesn't give us back the lost years. I know, but it opens the door to the possibility of healing. Slowly, with time, with actions, not just words. So there is hope. There is always hope, son. But it has to come with real change, with consistency, with proving to yourself and your children that you learned the lesson. I will. I promise you. Don't promise me. Promise Sophia and Liam. They are the ones who suffered most in all this. I already did. I explained everything to them. I asked for their forgiveness. I told them their mother and I made terrible mistakes. That you guys, you and Dad, were the good ones. That I was the one who was wrong. And what did they say? Sophia cried. She said she loved me, but she was disappointed. Liam just hugged me and said he wanted me to be like Grandpa. He broke down completely. I don't deserve those kids. Then deserve them. Work hard. Be honest. Teach them what your father tried to teach you, and you didn't learn until it was almost too late. Mason nodded, wiping tears with the sleeve of his worn shirt. We talked for 2 hours, really talked. Not about money, not about properties. About life, about regret, about lessons learned. When he left, he hugged me. A real hug. Not mechanical, not forced. I love you, Mom, and I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I love you too, son. And for the first time in years, it meant something. The following months were of slow rebuilding. Mason visited once a month, always brought a check. Small, but consistent. Sophia and Liam came more often, not hiding anymore. Now, with their father's permission, I watched Mason change slowly, become humbler, wiser, more like the man Arthur had dreamed he would be. Today, 4 years after the trial, Mason is still working. He has paid back $22,000. He lives modestly, but with dignity. Sophia is in college studying medicine. Liam is in high school. Good student, good son. And I have peace. The house in Pasadena is still there, waiting for my grandchildren. And every night I look at Arthur's photo. I did it, love, I tell him. I protected what we built. I saved our grandchildren. And maybe I saved our son too. If you ever face a situation where your family tries to manipulate you for money, remember my story. Protecting yourself isn't selfishness. It's survival. It's dignity. And if you have to choose between peace and family that hurts you, choose peace. Comment where you are watching this from if you have ever had to protect yourself from your own family. You are not alone. Dignity is priceless. And your peace is worth more than any inheritance.